Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's announcement. My name is Kelly Padden. I am the MLA for Chilliwack, Kent, and I'm going to be your MC today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on the territory of the Stalo people. We're privileged to serve, learn, and come together here. It's also home of the Squaw First Nation. It's such a privilege to be on this land for this announcement. Joining us today is Premier Eby and Grand Chief Doug Kelly of Stalo Tribal Council. We'll also hear from Attorney General Niki Sharma and a couple of representatives from the BC First Nation Justice Council, including Kory Wilson, Chair of the BC FNJC, and Boyd Peters, Director for BC FNJC. First, I would like to ask Elder Betty Wilson to introduce herself Betty Henry to introduce herself with her name and title.
Good afternoon, or good morning. Afternoon. My ancestral name is Shapitza, handed down by my late mother 50 years ago. I'm also known as Grand Chief Betty Henry from the Stalo Tribal Council. I belong to the Palaw tribe, and I have been honored by the BC First Nation Justice Council, Jackie, to welcome you here today to the Palaw territory. So saying that, welcome one and all, please. Bosiem.
Thank you so much for welcoming us, Grand Chief Betty Henry. It is so important that we ground ourselves on the land and remember the importance of why we're all here today. At this time, I would like to invite Premier Eby to talk about what we are celebrating today.
Thank you so much, Grand Chief, for welcoming us here today. Wonderful to see you. And thank you, Kelly. Kelly Padden, our MLA for Chilliwack, Kent, a great champion for the community here, emceeing today on this really important and exciting announcement. Really glad to see Grand Chief Doug Kelly here. Very appreciative to see you, as well as leadership from the First Nations Justice Council, Boyd Peters and Kory Wilson. I'm so proud of the work that we're doing together, and so glad that you could be here today to celebrate. In May, our government launched 12 hubs focused on a small number of people causing an outsized amount of chaos in communities. These are people grappling with serious mental health and addiction issues, and they're in and out of the justice system. And the hubs are really targeted at, they're really focused on targeted enforcement in relation to this small group, enhanced monitoring to keep communities safe. One of these hubs is based in Abbotsford, serving the region, including Chilliwack, and it coordinates responses across the justice system to connect offenders with services they need to support better outcomes, and takes a proactive approach to ensuring that communities are safe. It's just one part of our Safer Communities Action Plan that's working to create safe and healthy communities for everybody. If we've learned one thing this year, it's that going it alone doesn't work. We have to work together to address the challenging issues in our communities. And that is especially true when it comes to the issue of reconciliation and making sure that everyone has a path to a bright future. One of the pieces of work that we need to do in our province is making sure that we address the core issues that bring people into contact with the justice system, into conflict with the law, into conflict with their neighbors and communities. A lifetime in and out of jail doesn't make anybody safer and doesn't address the core issues that cause that cycle. We need to break that cycle. And for Indigenous people in BC, that specific group, if we want to break the cycle for someone who is Indigenous and involved in that cycle, we have to have culturally appropriate responses that meet the needs of where they're at. That's the only way that we'll be successful. And that's why it's so critical that the work here has been led by the First Nations Justice Council to address the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our justice system. About 5% of the people in our province are Indigenous, and yet about 30% of the people in our provincial jails are Indigenous. Now, this is due to a large number of factors, and we can't break down all of those barriers overnight. They began at the time of first contact, and they continue through trauma residential schools and on. But we can take steps to build the support for Indigenous people that they need to get out of that in and out of the prison system cycle and build a new life, and build a life that breaks that cycle, that makes them safer, that makes all of our communities safer. It's a win-win for everybody. 3 years ago, as part of our groundbreaking First Nations Justice Strategy, we partnered with the First Nations Justice Council to build Indigenous Justice Centres that are going to do exactly this work. Since then, we've opened centres in Prince Rupert, Prince George, and Merritt, as well as a virtual centre that can serve all of British Columbia. Each centre offers unique supports tailored to the local Indigenous community and services available. They're places where people are certainly able to access legal assistance, legal representation. But critically, they also provide support in working with agencies like the Ministry of Children and Family, like the police, like local communities, to address the circumstances that led the person into conflict with the justice system in the first place, by ensuring that housing, mental health, addictions, relationship issues, employment needs are addressed. They better support the needs of victims as well, through restorative justice options that seek to repair the harm done by violence or crime. Today, I'm so proud to announce that a new Indigenous Justice Centre will be opening right here in Chilliwack, so that more people can get culturally appropriate services to rebuild their lives. The services provided here will be determined after extensive consultations to ensure they meet the needs of the Stolo community. This will be the 4th physical justice centre in British Columbia and the first to open in the Lower Mainland, with 10 more on the way over the next 2 years. And we're also investing $10 million to support First Nations community-based justice programs, so First Nations can create and deliver the justice supports that they know are needed in their communities. The great news is that by helping individuals, the whole community will see the benefits of this remarkable service through improved safety and quality of life for everyone. I believe in a BC where everyone has a bright future. This means access to a home you can afford, the health care you need, and the chance to enter recovery and rebuild your life. By continuing to work in partnership, I know we'll build a better, fairer British Columbia for everyone. Thank you, and thank you to everyone involved in the new Justice Centre here in Chilliwack.
Thank you so much, Premier, for sharing this fantastic news. Next, I would like to introduce Kory Wilson, Chair of the BCF-NJC.
Hello, everyone. Gila Kasla, Grand Chief, for the welcome today. Hands up to you. Thank you very much for that. I'd also like to acknowledge the Squaw people and the Stalo Nations on whose territory we stand today. I'm grateful to be here in front of our First Nations Justice Centre in Chilliwack and the beautiful lands of the Stalo people. We know that Stalo people have been leaders in justice and leaders in reform and leaders in advancing jurisdiction for a long time. I'd also like to thank the Premier, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and our friends at the Indigenous Justice Secretariat, as well as others who are supporting us from the province of British Columbia. To the Stalo people, I look forward to working with you as a Justice Council and myself, working with you to ensure that we do everything correct moving forward, and we ensure that this centre is the most reflective and supportive of what it is that your people need, defined by you, designed by you. To our partner, and together we will right the wrongs of the past. To our partners in government, we Gila Kasla for all of your support and for having the courage to do things differently, to allow Indigenous people to lead on our path of justice and to right those wrongs of the past. Through the Justice Centre, again, we look forward to ensuring that Indigenous people are at the positive end of all statistics in terms of justice and no longer at the negative end. We are committed to ensuring that all of our Justice Centres have the most effective, most appropriate, culturally sensitive and relative services and ways of supporting people that ground themselves in the territory that we find our justice centres. The justice strategy proceeds on 2 tracks. Track 1 is the track that is about reinventing, reinvigorating, reimagining a justice system that's fully inclusive of Indigenous people and led by Indigenous people, and to change the criminal justice system and to right those wrongs of the past. Track 2 is about reestablishing and reinvigorating Indigenous systems of justice, Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and bringing those into the systems that we have today and ensuring that all of us are going to be successful. We all know the statistics. We all know the importance of doing these things differently. And I know our government partners know this just as well as we do. It is not acceptable that Indigenous people are at the negative end of any statistic in this country. And it is appalling that some of these statistics continue to climb. We must address them and we must right those wrongs. It is not acceptable either that my Indigenous daughters who are half Kwakwaka'wakw and half Haida are 5 times more likely to be murdered than a non-Indigenous woman and to face violence. We must change those. Study after study, commission after commission has concluded that the criminal justice system has failed Indigenous people. We can and must do better. Systemic racism and discrimination exists, and together we will work towards change. And this is an example of what we're all doing, how we can, when we're together, we're stronger, and we can work to make the systemic change that is absolutely necessary. Everybody has a role to play in advancing reconciliation as well as advancing DRIPA. And we know that truth must come first. We seem to forget it's a truth and reconciliation. So all of the work that we do will be grounded in truth, grounded in relationships. Today, we're witnessing the beginning of this transformative change, and we know that this change will not be easy. We will, some of us, if not all of us, will make mistakes in this process, but we have to lead as we've been taught by our ancestors, to lead with humility, to lead with our heart, and to listen. My granny would always say, we have 2 ears for a reason and 1 mouth for a reason. So, and we need to stay focused on the task and honor our ancestors, ensure that we do what we can to make everything better for the next generation. We acknowledge that this IJC will serve 24 nations and that we are on the Squaw First Nations territory. And we look forward to working with them and working with the Stalo communities to ensure that this Justice Centre is the Justice Centre that the people of this land and this nation need, and that we lead as not only as a Justice Council, but as a province, and that we lead a path towards doing things different and better for Indigenous people. Gila Kasala, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kory, for those words and those reminders. Next, I would like to invite BC's Attorney General, Niki Sharma, up to the podium.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Kelly, for that introduction, and thank you for the welcome, Grand Chief, and for it's such a wonderful honor to be here on this day. It's a very proud day to be on the traditional territory of the Stolo Nation and the home of the Squat First Nation. This is the first Lower Mainland's first Indigenous Justice Centre. And I want to start, the Premier mentioned and Kory mentioned all the reasons why it's important, but I wanted to start with gratitude for the work of all the people that are gathered here today that helped put this beautiful centre together. And I know a lot of people here from the First Nations Justice Council are here to witness it. We also have our team at the Attorney General's office over here to witness today. And to imagine all the people that it will help and all the barriers that will break down for people that walk through that door. It's a beautiful location. I invite everybody else to take a look at it. But I know that this milestone represents the hard work, the struggle, and the sacrifices of many Indigenous leaders and community members to arrive at today, and many years of tireless advocacy. The elders have been telling us for years what is needed, and they've been generous in sharing ways of restorative justice and wisdom that our justice system could learn from as we move forward. Finally, 3 years ago, the First Nations Justice Council in the province signed the groundbreaking First Nations Justice Strategy. In that strategy is 43 actions to reform the colonial justice system and revitalize Indigenous legal practices. The plan is bold and ambitious, and today is a step forward in that plan and indeed a day for celebration. Again, I want to thank the First Nations Justice Council for their leadership, for their partnership, for challenging us when we need to be challenged and helping us move forward in a positive way. The strategy that was developed together is really a game changer, and it's already transforming lives and will help us create a path to justice that meets the needs of Indigenous people. The strategy moves us away from a process that typically led to over-incarceration. It moves us towards increasing access to culturally relevant justice services to improve outcomes for Indigenous people. And it will help build stronger, more resilient communities that meet the distinct needs of their members. When I think of strong Indigenous leaders, I think of people like Grand Chief Doug Kelly and the BC First Nations Justice Council's chairs and directors, including Boyd Peters, who I know is here today. Boyd was appointed to First Nations Justice Council as a representative from the Union of BC Indians Chief, and he's been a councillor with the Secelis First Nation for more than 20 years. As we spend this time together in his region, I want to give my thanks to Boyd for his leadership and gratitude on that work, and is for dedication in building a better future for Indigenous people today and for generations to come. I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with and learn from the BC First Nations Justice Centre and the Stolo Nations as we improve our colonial criminal justice system, while at the same time removing barriers currently in the way for Indigenous laws, traditions, and customs to take shape again in our justice system. There's a lot more work to be done to fully realize the calls to action set out in the BC Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. But today I'm so grateful for everyone for their hard work in helping us get to this important milestone, improving public safety in our communities and advancing meaningful reconciliation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, AG Sharma. Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to take a moment to thank the BC First Nations Justice Council for inviting us here to Chilliwack Indigenous Justice Centre today. And I also want to recognize that His Worship Mayor of Chilliwack, Ken Popov, is here helping us celebrate. For all the hard work that has led to the progress made on the First Nations Justice Strategy so far, thank you. I hope you realize how important and life-changing this work is for First Nations and for everyone in British Columbia. This is truly a wonderful celebration to be part of. Our next speaker, I am so happy to introduce. Please join me in giving Grand Chief Doug Kelly a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you, Kory, David, Kelly, and all the others for the excellent announcement today. I was mindful as I was coming from my community of Sewali up near Cultus Lake, how in my short lifetime, I'll be 63 in a couple weeks, how much things have changed. Right behind me, across the street, there used to be an Indian and Northern Affairs Canada office. Our chiefs in the late 60s and early 70s decided that anything that others do to us or for us, we can do better ourselves. And they were successful in shutting that office down, and our own people began to deliver services through an organization that doesn't exist anymore, but it was called the Chilliwack Area Indian Council. Was thinking about a couple of concepts like Queequelston, restoring balance. When we're out of balance, we're not right. Something's troubling us. Grief, sorrow, trauma, life, all kinds of things can trouble us and knock us off track. And when we're in that place, we do things more often to hurt ourselves or the ones that we love the most. And the Premier is quite right. Sending those that are hurting, that have hurt others, to graduate school, otherwise called as corrections facilities, not helpful. Not helpful. So if we're going to make changes, then we need to begin implementing another principle that's described by the term yuck with it, making things right. Whenever something has been done that creates harm, there's an obligation to make it right. And this effort to support First Nations, the Justice Council, and creating a Justice Centre here in Chilliwack is a positive first step in making things right. I'm excited. Our chiefs are excited. Our Queequelstom leaders and staff are excited to be able to collaborate and look for ways to create safer communities for all of us, to restore balance, and to make things right. Aisha.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. When we talk about balance, I think that speaks to all of us. Now I would like to invite Boyd Peters, Director for BCFNJC, to share a few words.
Osiem, Acewale, Chayatit Tolskwi, Tequiti Costa Alis, a member of the BC First Nations Justice Council as well as Director. Thanking Kelly for the introductions. Thanking Niki for the kind words. And thanking everybody for being here on such a beautiful day to share in a celebration. Stala people are leaders in justice, and we've known that for since time immemorial. Such a proud peoples. While our Halkamelum language does not have a direct translation for justice, our elders have long taught us about our ancestral laws, our Snowayeth, our Siwis, which is our teachings. Our ancestral laws reflect a way of life that originates from our origin stories, that incorporates respect, balance, and harmony, a way of helping one another to survive, one that teaches care and a form of justice that focuses on relationships and interconnectedness of all living things. And I know that's what the Queequelstom program does as well here. Now that we have this Indigenous Justice Centre, we're in the exciting position to work with the surrounding communities that call this territory home to design the legal services that both the Stalo communities and the broader Indigenous peoples need. Today, we recognize the commitment of Premier Eby and the province of BC as a critical step in the path toward righting the wrongs of the past. The colonial governments in Victoria and Ottawa agree the minimum standards of the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples must guide our relations moving forward. I remember Steam's words quite loudly, and it still reverberates, "Get out of our way." And I remember those words, probably our Premier does now too. And we're grateful for today, but today is just the beginning. Over the coming weeks, the BC First Nations Justice Council is committed to working with the Stalo leadership to host a true ceremony and celebrate this summer the beginning of what we know will be a new chapter in Indigenous colonial government relations. This is an opportunity for us to build a justice system for our people based on our Indigenous laws and our teachings. We acknowledge and offer our gratitude to the dignitaries present today. Together, we will build a justice system for us, by us. Ones that respect our rightful jurisdiction and reflects the traditions that have never left us. Osiem.
Thank you, Boyd. It's always great to hear from you. You always have things that make us think afterwards, and I'll take that home with me today. And I would now like to invite Grand Chief Betty Henry back up to help us close the event in the right way.
Well, today I'm very thankful, very grateful to witness what's been said and what's been done for our people, for justice. Thank you for today. The song I'm going to sing is Over the Waves. It's the way our people have been for a long time, wave after wave after wave. I hope we all leave here lots of mat, one mind, one heart. Lucian. Oh, hello, hey, hello, hey, hello, hey, la, hello, hey, hello, hey, hello, hey, la, hello. Hey, hello, hey, hello, hey, la, hello, hey, hello, hey, hello, hey, la, hello, hey, hello, hey, hello, hey, la, Ocean.
Thank you, Grand Chief Betty Henry. It has been such an honor to be your MC today. Thank you again to the BC First Nations Justice Council for hosting. I know over the coming months you'll be working with First Nation communities to determine how this space will best be used. And I wish you so much success as you take the next steps together. At this time, I'll turn things over to our moderator for the media Q&A.
A reminder to our friends in the media on the phone line, please hit *1 and unmute your phones. If you have a question, you will not be heard until you are called upon. Start things off, we will go to Binder Sajan, CTV, on the phone line. Binder, over to you.
Hi there, Premier. Thanks for this. I'm just wondering, with regards to these centres, how will you measure success? Will there be data that is reported out regularly?
Thanks very much, Binder. So the centres will be measured on a number of metrics. Firstly, obviously, the number of people served. We're hopeful that they're able to serve a significant number of people here in the community. But they'll be tracked on additional metrics around the ability to refer to services and the outcomes of people that they provide services to. We do have, I don't know whether the Attorney General or someone from the Public Service would be best advised on which specific metrics, or we'll get that to you. We'll get that to you afterwards. The core of it is that we want these centres to be successful in the way that the First Nations Justice Council does, that it provides meaningful change, an opportunity for change in people's lives that are in contact with the justice system so that they can rebuild and get out of contact with the justice system, rebuild their lives in a healthy way going forward, which is going to benefit all of us.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, with regards to the wildfires that we continue to see, lots of concern over climate change, and just wondering, how do you justify some of the fossil fuel projects in BC like LNG, given the seriousness of the wildfire situation this year?
Thanks. I think British Columbians know better than many people the impacts of climate change. We've seen the most severe and most early impacts, I believe, here on the West Coast and some of our neighbors down the West Coast of North America compared to other places across Canada. We're starting to see some of what we've seen for a few years now. We saw the pine beetle being able to overwinter, killing a huge number of our trees. We've seen forest fire seasons literally burn down an entire town, warmer, drier summers. The impacts continue here in British Columbia, which is why I believe British Columbians support the kind of climate action that we're taking. We have the strongest climate action plan certainly in Canada, and one of the strongest in North America. We have committed to a new energy action framework that says that any new LNG facility that's proposed for our province has to be carbon neutral by 2030, and that we're putting in place a cap on emissions from the oil and gas sector to make sure that we're meeting the commitments we made to British Columbians about hitting our targets related to carbon pollution. We're showing a leadership role in Canada on this issue and in North America. In BC, we have the highest rate of adoption of electric vehicles in Canada, the second highest in North America, second only and just barely to California. So we see British Columbians taking action. We see as a whole, our province is taking action. We know there's more work to do, but we also are working to support federal initiatives as well around transitioning away from fossil fuels. This was also a big focus of my recent visit to Asia, discussing the clean energy future for British Columbia, and I'm really excited that as soon as this fall, as soon as the end of this summer, we have a major Korean company coming to visit British Columbia to talk about a hydrogen plant here in British Columbia. One of 26 proposals for hydrogen development here in British Columbia worth $16 billion. Projects at a wide range of readiness, but it's a really exciting time for British Columbia as we transition to a clean energy future and a leadership role here across Canada and across North America.
Thank you. Next, we have Wolf Deppner, Black Press. Wolf, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. A question regarding Glencore. That company now appears to be making a bid for the steel-making operations that Teck currently owns. What's your reaction to that latest development?
Well, I guess it's hard to say enough times my anxiety about a company with a corporate record like Glencore buying major assets in British Columbia. In particular, in the Elk Valley, this is an area of the province where there are literally thousands of jobs that are dependent on good relationships with First Nations in the area in order to be able to continue, as well as with the United States, given cross-border issues that have been raised by that country. It's an incredibly delicate time for that major economic driver in that part of our province. And I'm very nervous about a company with a record of paying so much money out in relation to allegations of corruption, coming in to potentially take over that major resource at such a sensitive time. I've expressed my concern to Teck. I've expressed it publicly. I know there are other offers on the table and other options available, and I hope that Teck is able to look at them, because this is an incredibly important economic piece of our province, and one that frankly a company with a record like Glencore's doesn't assist us with moving forward in a good way.
Wolf, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you. What, if any, role can the province play in potentially stepping in to prevent a takeover? What, if any tools are available at your disposal?
Well, we've certainly shared our concerns with Teck shareholders, urging them to reject the earlier proposal from Glencore. We shared our concerns with the federal government, who have ultimately the ability to decide whether a takeover like this is in the best interests of Canada. And I do know that our concerns about this company's corporate record are shared at the federal level. But ultimately, at the provincial level, we do look to the feds for that national interest control that they have in relation to takeovers like this.
Thanks very much. Next, we have Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun. Katie, your line's now open.
Hi, Premier. After another Friday of ferry cancellations, what do you make of Nicolas Jimenez's plans to modernize the ferry system with fast terminals that don't require you to physically hand over a ticket? Will that address some of the staffing issues? But on the flip side, are you worried about any layoffs that may result in?
Well, one of the big challenges that's faced by many employers in British Columbia is finding staff to be able to run at the level that our economy demands. And that is true across the province, and certainly not a unique issue faced by BC Ferries. I certainly support BC Ferries' efforts to find ways to operate to ensure continuous, fast, reliable, efficient, cost-effective service for British Columbians. And I do know that the big challenge that BC Ferries has is not laying people off, it's finding people to be able to run those essential services, which is also why we're doing work on important issues like housing, to make sure that people can afford to live close to work, close to ferry terminals, be able to take those jobs. And so this is there's a lot of factors that feed into this. And what BC Ferries needs to be focused on, and what it sounds like they are focused on, is ensuring that that reliable service is there for British Columbians. It's part of our highway system. Our economy depends on it, and so many British Columbians do as well.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I'm in touch with a family who is concerned about the treatment of a loved one who had terminal cancer and was had requested medical assisted dying and had to be transferred out of St. Paul's Hospital because they don't provide MAID. With the expansion of St. Paul's Hospital, are you concerned about that policy, that they have a policy that is at odds with the rest of the country in terms of its MAID policy?
Well, one of the priorities for our government, and I think it's a priority of all British Columbians, is that when people are sick, that they're able to access the services that they need in a way that is responsive to their needs, that's timely, and that's appropriate to their needs. We do have challenges in our healthcare system right now, and those challenges relate often to what we were talking about earlier, which is staffing levels. Making sure that the people are there and available to provide services to British Columbians in a timely way. And we know we face that issue in relation to cancer. That's why we put $800 million into the BC Cancer Foundation to address issues related to cancer. That's why we took the unprecedented step of contracting with a facility in Washington State to ensure that people were able to access cancer care when they needed it. And end-of-life issues are some of the most sensitive and challenging issues faced by British Columbians. I can't imagine what that family was going through, facing someone with a terminal cancer diagnosis who they love. And certainly, my heart goes out to them as they face those final moments. And this is a profoundly challenging issue to make sure that we're respecting dignity and ensuring that end-of-life and palliative care for people is delivered effectively in our province.
Next, we have Alec Lazenby, BC Today. Alec, your line's open.
Hello, Premier. Thank you for taking my question. With this new Indigenous Justice Centre and the actions that your government has taken to reduce the over-incarceration of Indigenous peoples within BC, I was just wondering, is a part of that going to be possibly stepping up training for police officers? I know there's been certain measures taken, but currently, in some cases, police officers are only trained over a matter of months, and that's not, some experts are saying that's not enough to really get trauma-informed and culturally sensitive informed practices trained on that. I was just wondering, are you thinking of expanding training for police officers, given that is, one of the main ways that Indigenous peoples do interact with the justice system is through police?
Well, today's announcement is really about finding ways to get people to a place where they're not in contact with the justice system, to address the core issue, whether it's a relationship issue, an addiction issue, a mental health issue, some other challenge that they're facing, that's bringing them into contact with police and the justice system, so that we're avoiding those moments and trying to help people rebuild their lives. This is the big challenge in front of us. But in terms of larger direction in the justice system and in relation to policing, that work was done by an all-party legislative committee that came up with the same conclusions that are implemented or suggested in the First Nations Justice Council's report to government, which is that we need to be transitioning jurisdiction, authority, responsibility in relation to First Nations communities to First Nations, and this includes policing, that Indigenous police services for Indigenous people, by Indigenous people in their communities are the way forward. And I'm certainly supportive of that. We've got a lot of work ahead of us to ensure that there is that First Nations policing capacity in place. And really glad to be here with Grand Chief Doug Kelly, who is a great champion of Indigenous communities taking jurisdiction, taking authority over the law in relation to their own people, because they know best the solutions that are going to assist. And some of our inspiration for this, some of mine certainly, was learning from the First Nations Justice Council about what happens in Washington State, where there are tribal courts that deal directly with the concerns of the First Nations community, and where there are tribal police. And there are examples of that in our province as well, but not as many as there should be. So it's an exciting time about that, about moving in that direction. But we have a lot of work ahead of us, which is why I'm so grateful for partnerships like the First Nations Justice Council, as well as Grand Chief Doug Kelly and his team at Stolo.
Throwing it over to Kory Wilson before we get to your next follow-up, Alec.
It is exciting. Just to follow up, Premier, I know you apologize because we just made a decision at the Justice Council on Thursday or Friday of last week to bring together and invite police officers from all of the different police services in British Columbia to attend a session that we're holding online on June 14th from 10 to 12, which will address our Strategy 22, and it will be the beginning of talking about cultural competencies for policing and figuring out how we can design something that actually leads to change and leads to not only increasing general foundational overall knowledge, but actually leads to systemic change in the practice, in the field, in the, all of the areas that police officers touch. So we're beginning that conversation, and we invite any police officers from your agency, representatives from your agency to attend, and I believe we can make sure that information is available for everyone afterwards. And thank you. Sorry, we should have, but we literally just did this on Friday. So very, very excited about this initiative. Thank you.
Alec, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you so much. And in terms of my follow-up, Premier, I know you've spoken about this before with the federal government instituting, bail reform as the provinces have been calling for. Just want to ask you again if you're at all concerned that, the rollback of some of, or not so much rollback, but, changes to some of the measures that were put in place to stop the overrepresentation of people within the justice system by the federal government, whether changes to that, whether you're worried that that will roll back some of the progress that's being made in reducing the over-incarceration of Indigenous and, other marginalized people in the justice system.
Well, one of the things that is a priority for British Columbians, it's a priority for me, it's a priority for the First Nations Justice Council, is reducing crime in our communities, reducing violence. You heard Kory Wilson from the First Nations Justice Council talk about her daughters and their increased risks of being victims of crime. Indigenous people are at greater risk of being a victim of violent crime in our province. And so those concerns are shared. So the question is, how do we deal with that issue? And the answer is initiatives like the First Nations Justice Centres. These centers, by addressing the core issue, whether it's an addiction issue, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's a housing issue, and doing it in a culturally appropriate way, is what breaks that cycle of offending and reoffending and so on for Indigenous people. And for the broader population of repeat offenders, we have that initiative in place as well through the hubs that I spoke about at the beginning, where we're identifying those individuals that are causing a disproportionate amount of harm in community, following them through a team of prosecutors, police, probation officials, correction officials, to be able to identify them and ensure that they get the services they need and the attention they need to keep our communities safe. It's not going to be a federal criminal law that addresses that in and out cycle. What it's going to be is an interruption in what's causing that person to behave in that way. So is it addiction services? Is it mental health services? Is it something else? And is it delivered in a culturally appropriate way? I think that there is broad agreement that when someone is committing repeated violent offenses, they should be kept in custody until we can address that issue. I don't think that's the issue here. The issue here is how do we break a cycle that someone's involved in, and that's why I'm so excited about the Justice Centres being able to do that.
Last question we have is Dirk Meisner, Canadian Press. Dirk, your line's now open.
Hi, this is for the Premier. I'm wondering how you feel Indigenous people should feel about these justice centers. Are they a place of help, or is it a place where it's sort of a sign that you're in trouble and maybe you should hopefully not have to use them?
Okay. Well, my hope is that because this is an initiative that comes from Indigenous people, that it's designed for Indigenous people, that it's delivered by Indigenous people, my hope is that it's seen for what it is, which is an Indigenous initiative to support Indigenous people. But I think that it would be best maybe for me to turn it over to Kory Wilson to speak about her perspective on this.
Wait for it to go down. A little bit of a height difference. Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, I think there's no question that these justice centers are evidence of transformative change, of doing things differently. We know the statistics, as has been stated earlier, Indigenous people are at the negative end of every statistic in the criminal justice system. This cannot continue. We must do this differently. And the Justice Council has gotten its mandate from all First Nations in British Columbia, and I know we'll see soon a Métis Justice Strategy as well that will come out. So it's an Indigenous justice strategy for British Columbia, created by First Nations for the people of British Columbia. And we have to acknowledge, too, that if First Nations, Indigenous people do well, the rest of our province will do well. It's not going to be an easy process. It hasn't been an easy process. We've gone from 1 employee to 60 employees in the last year or so. We've made some mistakes along the way, but we are having to work together and acknowledge, and the government has created the Indigenous Secretariat within the ministry. So we're taking our steps, moving this forward, and listening as much as possible, and ensuring that all of the work that we do is guided by Indigenous people, reflects the values of our culture, our ancestries, and our teaching, as well as ensuring that we make systemic change in the criminal justice system. And in an ideal world, yes, I would love to see Indigenous people only come to the Justice Centre to have lunch, because that means our people are not entering the justice system. So we need to work towards that and ensure that Indigenous people do not come in contact with the justice system. But for now, when they do, we're going to make sure that the services are culturally appropriate, reflective, and aimed at decreasing that overrepresentation and ensuring that they are allowed to be self-determining and move on with their hopes and their dreams. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sure. Can you keep Chief Wilson up there? My next question was for her. The Justice First Nations Justice Program is about 3 years old now. I'm just wondering where she would like to see it, say, in the fall of 2024 when we go to a provincial election in BC.
Well, hopefully, I mean, I'm very aspirational. In the fall of 2024, I would hope to see all 25 of our Indigenous justice strategies completed. The reality is we can't move that fast. We're a small and mighty team, but we're doing the best we can and working as quickly and as fast as we can. And again, the hands up goes to all of the people that are working alongside us and with us. But in the fall of 2024, at by-election time, certainly we want to see our justice strategy advance as far as possible, and ensuring that no matter what happens, that what we've done, it's supported by all sides, all parties, all people, not only First Nations, but the rest of the people in the province. And yeah, if we can, we'll aim for 25, but I'm not sure that we'll get to 25, but that's our goal, and we'll work hard for that.
Thanks very much, everyone. This concludes today's announcement.